we're so glad to have somebody on who understands the importance of democracy and how we can truly defend it. And so I welcome everybody to the meeting. And Sophia, you want to take it away?
Yes, everyone, I hope you can both hear and see me, and good evening and happy Women's History Month. We wanted to do something special for this month, of course. I think that having former Lieutenant Governor Healey and our executive chair of the Forward Party be with us is a real honor. She's amazing. You're going to love her as much as we do when you get to know her. And she and I are going to do a bit of a Oprah. Think about how Oprah used to sit people on the stage with her. We may not be physically next to one another, but we're going to have a dialogue, and then you'll be able to ask some questions as well. And before we get to that, let me set the table, and then I'm going to do a brief introduction of Lieutenant Governor Healey, and then we will go from there. So a couple things that I don't think I need to say. If you are alive and you have a pulse, you understand we are in uncharted territory. Probably for the first time in, my word, maybe 100 years. We are going to be 250 next July, this great republic of ours, and we are being tested right now. Checks and balances. What and how far can the executive go? DOGE, Social Security, Medicare. The Republicans have complete control of the United States Congress as well as the presidency. And what does that mean for the minority party, the Democratic Party? And you saw what happened with the continuing resolution, and people are angry at town halls, and the American public is worried about a recession, and they're worried about eggs going higher, not lower, and gas going higher, not lower, interest rates staying steady, not higher or lower, but they're pretty high right now. And so all of that kind of brings us to who is this Forward Party, and what are we doing, and what do we represent? And so I thought it would be important on our statewide calls that we do every month. I'm vice chairman of communications for the Virginia Forward Party. And I thought that it would be good to have a guest speaker every month when you join us, and we will dialogue, and we'll have a fireside chat called Let's Talk About It. So let me introduce the Lieutenant Governor a little bit so you know about her. You can certainly Google her later and you'll find a lot of great information. But Kerry Healey is currently executive chair of the Forward Party, the national party, and teaches public sector leadership at Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. She previously served as the first woman president of Babson College from 2013 to 2019. From 2003 to 2007, Healey served as the 70th Lieutenant Governor of Massachusetts. She holds an AB in government from Harvard College and a PhD in political science and law from Trinity College, Dublin. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you formally to Lieutenant Governor Kerry Healey. Kerry, are you with me?
I am. Thank you so much.
Well, listen, we are honored, and happy Women's History Month to you and all the ladies out there. I'm going to kind of give you your first question. It's going to be a bit of a twofer. So, As you know, there has been a great deal of conversation about DEI, and it's Women's History Month, and we saw that at Arlington National Cemetery and the Pentagon and other places, they're taking down women, people of color who've achieved great things. And with that kind of as a context, right, in Women's History Month, it seems like we're going backwards a little bit. So the first question I kind of want you to keep in mind and answer for me is, are we going backwards in your opinion? And two, tell us why you left the GOP, because you were an elected Republican woman official. I believe you served under Governor Mitt Romney, who was also the Republican nominee for president in 2012. So tell us why you left the GOP and became a forwardist in the context of kind of my first question.
Well, Sophia, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I also want to thank the Virginia Forwardists for having me as their first guest. speaker, and it's wonderful to see you all. And Virginia just inspires us at the national level. So you are our test case. You're our shining star that we like to point to when people ask, how's Forward doing? We say, look at Virginia. So thank you for having me, first of all. Throughout most of my life, and I think most of our lives generally, we've had the sense that history is sort of bending toward freedom and justice and equality, and it might have some bumps, but that history is on the right trajectory, and in terms of increasing human freedom and human prosperity, and certainly more equality for people who haven't had that in the past, and more recognition, for their achievements. And suddenly we are seeing that pendulum come back. And I believe there are always corrections, just as we, go from having, 8 years of a Republican president to maybe having 8 years of a Democratic president, and back and forth and back and forth. There's always a pendulum, and there's always some correction. But this time it seems more extreme. The pendulum swung further outside the boundaries of what we had considered to be acceptable political behavior in the past in America. And so, the question is, where is that pendulum going to come back and rest? And can we again kind of circumscribe that political wind that is blowing us constantly one way and another, to something that is more focused on really the welfare of the people, and not simply political advantage or groups that have somehow captured this advantage through corruption or simply political machinations. So I think when we see these outer trappings of progress being removed from our eyes, I worry about what children growing up right now are thinking. I worry that they are that they're thinking that progress can go backwards, that perhaps they will have less freedom in the future, and so that worries me. And as to why I became a Forwardist, I was a Republican for 42 years, and I registered at 18, and I was, I went up through, I was a college Republican, and I raised money, and I went door to door, and I did all those things. I became party chairman in Massachusetts, which was a very thankless task to be a Republican Party chairman in Massachusetts. We were 13% of the voting public. But was able to recruit someone who could speak to everyone, and who had a vision, Mitt Romney, who had a vision that could inspire people who were not only Republicans, but independents and Democrats. And I was very lucky to have landed in a state. Florida is my home state, but I went to college in Massachusetts, as Sophia mentioned, and I adopted it because of the fact that Massachusetts has been, so important in history, and is continues to be on the cutting edge of new ideas and new developments. And what I like about Massachusetts politics is that even though it's wildly out of balance in terms of how many people identify as Democrats and how many people identify as Republicans, really 60% of the people in Massachusetts identify as independents.
Yes.
And that's what has kept it in balance over the years. And so there's collaboration between the two parties. There's patriotism and belief in our history and pride in our history. And there's a desire to reward people from all over the world who come here and make America our home and contribute to our society. Here in Boston, 30% of the people in the city are foreign born. And so it's a wonderful melting pot in Massachusetts. And when I got here, I thought this will be my new home. And I had a good home in the Republican Party for a number of years, but I always felt on the fringes of it because I was a Massachusetts Republican. I was very, from many people's standpoints, a liberal in terms of my social policies. I was an early embracer of certainly choice, but also marriage equality. But I was a real economic conservative as well. And I believe that America should lead in the world, and that the world is safer when America does lead both in terms of power, but also in terms of principle. And so for me, that sort of tipped the balance toward, I guess I'm a Republican. But what I've come to see now is that there isn't a place in the Republican Party for people like me. There's not a place in the Republican Party for people like Christy Whitman and other leaders from that era. Honestly, there isn't a place in the Republican Party right now for someone like Mitt Romney. And so people who are principled leaders, who are not populists, who are not focused on the leadership of one person, but on the enduring principles that our country was founded on. And so I felt after the attack on our Capitol on January 6th that I needed to resign from the Republican Party. And I did the next day. And I didn't know what I was going to do next. And then after a year or so, I met Lindsay Drath, who was working with Forward. And I had always had the greatest respect for Governor Whitman. My children loved Andrew Yang and had been, very big supporters of Andrew Yang. And I thought, how cool would it be if I were able to do something politically that my children finally approved of? So I rushed in and joined. And I'm going to dedicate the next 10 years of my life to this. I'm a volunteer. Most of us in this movement are volunteers. But I want to see the party established as a genuine alternative for the 50% of Americans who don't identify as either Republicans or Democrats.
What a first answer to my question. You hit it out the park in the sense of just, I think, giving people a good sense of how many of us, me included, very similar, woman of color, joined the party in 1988 was the first year I could vote. I voted for President George Herbert Walker Bush and was able to work on his 92 reelect. We weren't successful, but it was exciting. And you could kind of see the birth pains beginning, if you will. And then you got to the Tea Party and it became more and more difficult for people of color, women, et cetera, to really, particularly if they were more moderate, centrist type Republicans as we were, for obvious reasons. If you're a woman of color or a woman, you're going to be pro those social issues, at least most of the time, that favor the advancement of women, the advancement of people of color, et cetera. And so I'm with you, and I feel politically homeless. So I was really excited about the Forward Party. So let's get to this and break this down a little bit more, Kerry. Tell us in a nutshell, if you can, what the forward vision and plan is for America's next great political party. Why should people pay attention?
Well, people should pay attention because we are gaining momentum, first of all. But in terms of our vision, right now, we're trying to build the infrastructure, the support that independent candidates need to run and win in America against the two establishment parties that have been crowding everyone else out. And in doing so, we're going to be giving American voters more choice. And so the whole idea of the party, as far as I'm concerned, and I believe I speak for the party, I hope I do, is that we are trying to increase the choice for all American voters by creating a platform that has not existed before. And the thing that politicians seem to love about our party is that they can really represent their voters, that they don't have to be beholden to an ideology or an agenda or a group of issues that is dictated by a national party down to the local agenda. They can actually listen to the people they represent, and they can prioritize those issues that are genuinely meaningful to the people they work with every day. And that's what representative government should be. And it's really impossible right now with our current two-party system. So our vision for how we're going to accomplish this is that we're going to work with the states, people like all of you, and try to create that grassroots movement necessary to identify people in our communities who are willing to run, who are willing to adhere to our principles. We're a party of principles right now, more than policies. We'll have policies in the future, and they'll be as diverse as we are, and they'll be different in different parts of the country, but all of them will adhere to our principles. And when people ask us what those principles are, I'm almost embarrassed at the simplicity of it. I mean, the idea of adhering to the Constitution, imagine that. And yet that's what we're seeing right now on the television every day. People trying not to adhere to the Constitution, pushing the boundaries of it. And as you said, when we're coming up on our 250th anniversary of the Constitution, it's a miracle that it is held as well as it has unto this point, but we need to defend it. So the first thing we ask all of our candidates to do is to support the Constitution. The second thing is rule of law. And when you think about what rule of law is, it sounds so abstract, but what it really is, it means that every law in the country is going to apply the same to me as it applies to you. It's going to be enforced as aggressively against me as against you, and it's going to support you if someone wrongs you just the same way as if someone wrongs me. And that's what rule of law is, and it's the basis of equality. We don't have equality as Americans if we don't have rule of law. And in no country around the world will you see prosperity, will you see people being able to do business, to be able to care for their families, to avoid corruption, if there isn't rule of law. And when we're looking around us, we're seeing suddenly ethical boundaries are being forced and so forth. We need to really focus on this basic principle that no one is higher than the law, and everyone will be subject to it. So that's the second principle that really means a lot to me among our principles. Another is grace and tolerance. You know, we have been manipulated by our political parties to think that the only issues that matter are the wedge issues, the ones that polarize us, the ones that make us hate each other, to think poorly of each other, to dehumanize each other. And those issues only serve political purposes. They are not helping you or me or people at home pay their bills, feel safe, get good educations, live happy lives. Those wedge issues make us angry. They make us uncomfortable. They make us hate each other. And so the idea of having a principle that is grace and tolerance, but not only in our own outlook, but also in how we treat each other, in a political context, it's revolutionary at this point. And so it's going to be hard for us. And when we ask our candidates to come forward, we look at their social media, we look if they're out there just beating people up day and night, you know, and there's a lot of passion in politics right now, but it's got to be around principle. It's got to be around ideas. We need to depersonalize these discussions and make sure that for the people, we have grace and tolerance. So that's really important to me as well.
So, you know, Kerry, you said something fascinating. I told you I'm going to do an Oprah like aha moment and put a pin in it. And you said something I want to push back on a little bit because I find it fascinating. I 1000% agree that we have to be civil in our civil discourse in our politics. And we've lost that. The Mitt Romneys of the world, the John McCains and the Bob Doles. And, you know, you can go back throughout and find Everett Dirksen and you can go
Bill
to Jerry
Clinton, Barack Obama. Yeah.
And people who knew how to be civil and respectful, but know how to fight. You know, one of the things that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer took a hard hit on this past week was that he rallied enough Democrats to support the Republican CR bill. And you saw there was a lot of anger from the base, a lot of anger from progressives because people feel like he capitulated, he gave in. And my question to you is, how do we, as forwardists, if we're going to engage in this type of climate, I think civility, tolerance, and grace are great, but that's not our climate. And people seem to really like the Roman arena, the sport, which is why Trump came back into power. That's my opinion.
No, absolutely. And
so what are your thoughts about that? How do you do both? How do you be civil, but also be tough?
I think it's going to be incredibly difficult. And I think people are going to have to be sickened and tired of this extreme aggression and hatred of each other. And we're going to probably have to see some of the bad outcomes of it. I mean, we're seeing it now with the violence, the domestic violence that we're seeing against the Tesla agencies. People turn to violence when they feel they aren't being heard, when they feel they don't have any other outlet they turn to violence. And so we need to start creating more channels of communication for people who want to communicate differently, who need to decompress. And the best way that you can do that is to elect a different kind of communicator. Elect people who can go into Congress or go into your local school board and be that person who listens, the person who creates compromises across ideologies, and the person who comes up with new ideas. You know, earlier we were talking about the idea of forward, the name itself, forward. You know, we don't want to just take the lowest common denominator ideas from the left and the right, like things that everyone thinks is like, okay, that's kind of boring and okay, we can all agree on it. No, we want to come up with new, bold ideas that no one's talked about before. And we want to be able to put that out on the table and say to people, do you like it? Do you not like it? You know, and really have a platform to be able to discuss what's best for society moving forward. One of the things that is going to be a priority for us in the next 2 years is trying to run at least 5, hopefully more, members who would be Forward Party members for Congress. And we need to do it all over the country. And in 4 years, we need to run twice as many. And there are a couple reasons why we need to do this. One is so that we can become a federally recognized party, but also we need to do it because even that small number, let's say we had 5 independent voters in Congress right now, they could decide everything.
Yep.
They could decide everything. They could moderate every action. They could
Absolutely.
make sure that the conversation was around things that mattered.
Yep.
And so we may be small, and we don't need to be larger to have a profound impact on the future of democracy.
Yeah, I mean, Kerry, imagine if there were 5 independents in the United States Senate. Game over, game changer, right?
3.
I mean, truly independents that caucused with themselves, and they could go work with the Republicans when it made sense, and they could work with the Democrats when it made sense. But their legislation would have people who would say, well, I guess I better join that because these guys make or break us. In the House, you would probably need at least 10 or more. But the point is, you're all right that the only way we change this system of too much money, too much unkindness, too much nastiness, and everything else that we're seeing is that we have to elect a different type of politician. Last question, and then we'll open it up to you who've joined us tonight for some questions. So you and I were talking earlier in the green room before folks came on about you being from the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, me being from the great Commonwealth of Virginia, and how pivotal and critical those 2 colonies were 249 years ago when this great country was founded in Philadelphia on July 4th, 1776. And next July, we will turn 250 years old in this republic. And it's fascinating to me, Kerry, and we were talking about this, and I want to get your take on it. I don't think it's by accident that the great test of this republic is coming right now. 200 and almost 50 years in, we'll have a lot of celebrations. There'll be a lot of reading of those great words that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're going to talk about those words a lot next year. I want to know, in the context of what we're seeing right now, how do we, the people, by working with the Forward Party, how do we reimagine, recreate, and inspire this republic to get back to those principles you talked about, which are Constitution, rule of law, and freedom, if I were to put them in a nutshell? How do we, the people, take our government back? I think is really the bottom line.
Yeah, I think we start at the bottom. I think we start at the grassroots. I think we build something incredibly strong. We've seen again and again that if you're an independent presidential candidate, whether you're Perot or whether you're Bloomberg taking a look at it, there's no amount of money that's going to allow you to come in at that level as an independent and succeed. And we saw with the no labels efforts recently to find a Republican and a Democrat who would run together as an independent ticket, you know, to represent compromise. that didn't work because people looked at it and they said, well, what do we do on day 2? You know, who's going to be out on the ground supporting us? Who's going to be collecting our signatures? Who's going to be, you know, helping us raise money? Who's going to be helping me run the campaign? I've worked on presidential campaigns. They are vast machines. And the idea that one person, no matter how wealthy, can rally that kind of support, it's just not true. The only way you can build a new party that will support democracy is from the ground up. So I think first of all, we're doing that. But then I think we really have to think about some new ideas. And these are my ideas. These aren't forward ideas yet, but these are just my ideas. But I think we have to think about national service. And we have to think about, you know, a number of forms of national service, not just military service, but service to each other. So that young people can get to know people who are different from themselves, who can perhaps travel within the country and understand, you know, the great differences across this country, and understand what it is to actually give to someone else. We need to get to know each other on a human level. Everybody likes the people they know personally, but they can objectify and imagine almost anything about people who they've never met and they've only been told about. So we need to have some common experience as Americans that knits us back together. Right now, everyone gets their news from a different source. Everyone has a different educational experience. Everyone has, you know, different cultural experiences. We listen to different music. We watch different movies. We don't even know about the same stars anymore. And so there's has to be something that knits us together again as a nation. And I'm hoping that it's a newfound sense of wishing to serve each other. And I would be very excited if our party eventually embraced that as one of its tenets.
You know, Kerry, to kind of wrap it up, and one of the things that's bothered me that I feel that we've lost a hold of is the truth, the basic truth, basic facts. And a lot of that has to do with what you just said, the news source. If you watch one network over here, you got one point of view. If you watch another network over here, you have another point of view. I'm old enough to remember Peter Jennings and Tom Brokaw and Dan Rather coming on the evening news. And when you watched it, they all had the same set of facts. They might have had a different way they talked about it or engaged their guests, but there was no assault on truth. What do you think about this assault on truth we see where blatantly they tell you, like January 6, 2021, that what you saw wasn't what you saw, and it was really a bunch of tourists having a nice time? Really? I mean, and there are tens of millions of Americans who do not know that a certain network was sued and had to pay an $800 million fine. So you see what I mean? It's like, how do we get back to truth?
Yeah. Again, I think it's going to take people actually learning to trust each other again. And the only thing that people will really trust in this era now that everything can be manipulated electronically, is knowing people one-to-one in person. Wow. And so I urge you all, especially to recruit forward candidates to run for city council, to run for school board. We're recruiting mayors across the entire country. We're very excited. We expect to have some pretty big mayoral announcements in the next 2 weeks. So we're excited about that. But that is the level at which we have to work to rebuild trust. And then when people see people progress in politics who they've known personally, when they've known them on a local level, they're going to trust them. They're going to know that what they're saying is true.
Okay, well, Lieutenant Governor Healey, this has been an amazing dialogue to have with you. You and I could go on and do this all day, and then, you know, Eric would be looking for me later. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to open it up, and Eric, I'm going to let you take over to ask some questions or take some questions from our audience if we have some, and let's limit it to just 2, please.
Joseph Plummer, go ahead.
Hi, President Healey. I'm from the Babson community, so I appreciate you.
Oh, really? Wonderful to see you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I'm curious if you could actually talk about your time at Babson and how you might think about deploying entrepreneurial thought and action to a political party. And I think there was a number thrown out at like 500,000 total elected offices in the country. How we think about like adoption rate or like progress and outcomes and just like the next 10-year time horizon that you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, yes, I absolutely learned so much during my time at Babson. The idea that everything can be approached from an entrepreneurial perspective, and that entrepreneurial thought and action is actually at the core of all positive change. So I'm super excited to be employing those strategies and politically. You mentioned the 500,000 people who are in elected office nationally, that's below the presidency. So okay, so 500,000. Guess how many have no opponent in their final election? 70%. 70% have no opponent. That's not democracy. When 70% of our quote elected officials are running as if they were, in the former Soviet Union. Here's your candidate. Good luck, and then another 10% of those offices are empty. So only 20% of our elected officials right now have to face anyone from another party. So here's my sort of entrepreneurial, I hope, innovative thought about how we go about this. My thought is that we're not a third party. My thought is that we're a second party. When you look at how many states across the country have one party domination, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, it's 39 states, or almost 80% of our states. You go to the ballot box and there's no one to vote for if you're not a member of that party. And so there's a huge opportunity for us there to come in and get between the two parties and offer something different. And as a result, become the second party in America, the alternative to either the Republicans or the Democrats, depending on what party has figured out how to have a monopoly in your area. And we did a test case with this with Dan Osborne in Nebraska. He ran against a Republican incumbent in the U.S. Senate. And he made more than 40% of the vote. He received more than 40% of the vote. And, and he was like an independent. So there's a hunger for this. And I believe we just have to think differently about it and keep testing things out. And this is, again, the entrepreneurial method, to test things out and learn from it and then pivot. But we need to be testing things out on the local level again and again, and then hearing from all of you about what you hear resonating, what's working on a local level, so that we can share that knowledge with others.
Kerry, let me ask a question in there, because I think it probably hit everybody the way it did me. You said 70% of those people who are elected have no opponent. How does that happen? Is that the primary problem? What happens there?
Well, it's both primaries, where all the action happens in the primary. So if you're not a member of that dominant party, then you didn't get to participate at all, especially if there aren't open primaries in your state. And then the other way is that just people being lazy, people saying being disengaged. And we get the government we deserve, right? We need to be engaged. So we need to do this.
All right, Eric,
together.
Next question.
Yeah, Michael Brown, you had your hand raised.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for being here, Lieutenant Governor
Michael.
Healey. Hi. So my question kind of comes from a different way. I'm thinking towards the future of Forward's growth. Like right now, Forward has a pretty what started as even more concise number of principles that sort of guide the Forward Party ahead, not policy, but principles. And I'm just wondering, as Forward Party grows, and as it grows, and it particularly has to start to weigh into a lot more of those wedge issues. Like I think about it, particularly when I think about it from the perspective of my own community, talking to people in the Black community as well. And like they will see a vote very essentially as a protection of their community. And that's part of I think the reason for a lot of the viciousness that we see today, that, a vote that isn't for a Democrat, for instance, means that someone's going to vote for my disenfranchisement of my vote. or it's going to mean somebody is going to seek to end my marriage status if it's a marriage of the same sex. And it's always these aspects that people are looking for when it concerns, like, okay, not only is my vote a vote for maybe it's less about what I vote for, what I necessarily want policy wise, but it's a more of a vote based upon how do I best protect myself in the community.
Yep.
And I guess I wonder, how do you see Forward Party starting to tackle or beginning those discussions on, when we're talking about voter rights or rights for certain communities, or even things like union support? At some point, Forward will have to make a decision about, oh, is this a pro-union space, or is this are we agnostic to union sort of space? Just wondering how you think, as an organization, Forward will begin those types of discussions.
Yeah. So first of all, those will be grassroots discussions. And I'm fascinated to see how it's starting to evolve. In some of our states are beginning those discussions. They're holding focus groups. They're starting to have discussions around, what are the local issues that matter most. We're starting to take some polls of our membership. And so if you see requests for, hey, what do you think about X, coming into your inbox from Forward, please answer it. Because we are trying to begin to test the water, to see where we are. Most recently, we had a poll around healthcare issues, because I think healthcare issues are going to become extremely important in the next probably couple months. I think that we're going to see probably some attacks on especially Medicaid services for a number of states, and therefore it will impact a lot of people. And so we need to begin to get to know ourselves better. And we need to begin to do that kind of polling, do that kind of research, those focus groups, to find out where most of us stand on issues. And we should also be allowed to have a pretty big tent. I mean, Christy Whitman calls it an umbrella, right? So especially on the social issues, we don't aspire to taking positions on something like choice. At least I don't. I want to be part of a group that can respect people's religious differences. If they have genuine, differences of opinion, I want to respect that. And so I'm hoping that what we see ultimately is a grassroots swell of different policy positions that are appropriate for different regions, and that we'll find some commonalities, and that those will be the things that national can hang on to, like those few principles that we have today. We'll probably have a few principles that we feel very strongly about. I'll tell you what I think they are now, just what I'm thinking they are. The first one is human dignity. So lifting up human dignity. So policies that increase and recognize human dignity, and that can be healthcare, education, anti-poverty, all kinds of things that can go on in that area. I think the other thing is growth, economic growth, and expansion, because I don't know if you have heard of this idea of abundance. But right now we're living in a society that really is trying to increase our sense of scarcity. Like, if you get something, we don't get it. It's mine, and therefore it's not yours, and you're going to suffer. Even when you were talking about the voting dynamic, it's like, I'd better vote for these folks because otherwise someone's going to take something away from me. It's a fear-based voting pattern, as opposed to one that is really focused on, imagine how we could build the economy so everyone could benefit, and build it in ways that are more equal, and that distribute wealth more broadly than in the current situation. And then the last piece is the democracy piece. So for me, it's like dignity, it is growth, and democracy. I think those are the three things that would probably make me inspired.
Kerry, to circle back and to kind of piggyback on the question, when I look at these issues, I agree with you. I think freedom is the big word we haven't talked about a lot today. Freedom is the word going into 2026. Right. And I personally am pro-life, but because I'm pro-freedom, I believe another woman has a right to make a different choice than I do. And I think that's one of the most fundamental things that we've lost in this country, the respect for other viewpoints, other religious beliefs, it's the tolerance that you talk about.
Yeah.
And can you say a little about freedom? And is that something that's a core principle?
Well, I do. When I talk to Fortis, freedom is really critical. And I mean, they're independents. Many of them are independents. Why are you an independent? Because you want the freedom to choose your candidate. You don't want to be told what to think. You don't want to, you don't want to have to take a particular set of views because they're dictated to you, from the party structure. And so we have to be careful when we're adopting, policy positions, because freedom is really critical to Fortis, and we always need to respect that as well.
Thank you. Any more questions, Eric, or are we done?
Yeah, let's do one more because we have a question from Sheila, who is the head of our women's committee.
Love Sheila. Hey, Sheila.
Hi, Sheila. Nice to meet you.
Hi. Yes, hi. You were talking earlier about the need, well, I don't know if it's the need, but the problem that people are not really equal in the country. And I'd like to for you to talk about that a little bit more from a forward perspective. I think you kind of touched on it with freedom, but it's something that's really near to my heart about why people aren't free. And I think that we're seeing that backlash right now because of it. Women, people of color, everyone, we're just not free, and we're not equal. And it really bugs me. So I wanted to hear what you had to say about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I want to harken back to that notion of rule of law, right? That we have to have certain principles that apply to everyone equally. And we have to have representatives who understand and are empathetic to the concerns of all parts of our society, right? And whether it's women, whether it's people of color, whether it's people who are impoverished, whether it's people who have certain challenges, whether it's, all of life's experiences. We need to have representatives that look like America. So I think that that's the only way that we get back to trying to make sure that everyone is treated equally, is if we recognize their human dignity, their basic equality as human beings, and try to construct policies that support that. And it's sort of a radical notion of how do you think about creating policy that recognizes each person's human dignity. It's a challenge I think we should all take.
We'll end with this. Sheila, great question. And we opened with DEI and talking about the attacks on DEI, et cetera. But, I think I would leave you with the words that I recited from memory that I've had forever of Thomas Jefferson writing the Declaration: all men are created equal. That is a fundamental belief, even though at the time it was written, we had enslaved persons. But the goal of this country has always been to perfect the union, to move us forward. And so, again, I would leave those words of Jefferson with you, that's really, to me, Kerry, what this is all about. The fact that our rights come from someone higher. We are inherently equal. We're inherently people that should be treated with dignity and grace and goodness. And I think that, I'll give you the final word on where you think we are and how we get to that 250th birthday in a better place. Any thoughts on that?
Well, what I would like to say to everyone on this call is please think about, I'm so glad you're here. First of all, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad that you've taken the time to come to participate in what might seem very quixotic, might seem extremely difficult and unlikely to occur. But you all have something really important to contribute. And if you've ever thought about running for office, I just want to encourage you to take that leap. It's not easy, and it's not easy on your family. But what it does do is it allows you to see really the best of humanity as well as some of the worst. And right now, all we're seeing around us, all we're seeing on television is the worst of humanity. When you put yourself out there and you run for office and you get to talk to people of all walks of life, everyone in your community, you will be inspired by the importance of what it is to serve, and you will get your faith in humanity back, and you will never regret it. Whether you win or you lose, you will never regret participating in the process. And I've won a little bit and I've lost a lot. And so I am an expert on this topic, and I urge you all to run for local office, to run for higher office, wherever you think you would like to serve. We want to support you and help you find that place.
Kerry,
So thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much for being with us. And let's give some virtual applause here. You guys know how to do it. Thank you so much. And I will throw this back to Eric and just simply ask all of you, before you go to bed tonight, I'm going to give you some homework, or when you get up with your coffee in the morning, read the Man in the Arena poem or speech by Teddy Roosevelt. Read it. Read it with your kids. Sit with it for a minute and really take it in. He's probably my favorite president. It's a toss-up between him and Lincoln, both Republicans. God, they wouldn't recognize their party. But read that Man in the Arena poem and take it in. And that's what I think this country needs a little of right now. So thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you for being with us. And Eric, I'll throw it back to you.
Thank you, Sophia.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. That was very inspiring for what the circumstances of our country are right now. And what you ended on, running for office, is exactly what we want to encourage everyone to do. And Carrie Ann Templeton just put in a plug for a Running for Office webinar that is happening tomorrow night. Please check that out. There, she put the link in the chat. And we here in the Virginia Forward Party are talking to a handful plus of candidates to run either as forward, to be endorsed independents. We're even talking, or we're even approaching some Republicans about the possibility of affiliation, because there are a few Republicans in the Virginia legislature who may be just sane enough currently to agree with Ford's principles and to not follow the party line. So we're currently looking to challenge extremists in Virginia. And somebody brought up in the chat, what about, us being the spoiler? And I want to point out that we are specifically looking at districts where, maybe the other party does not have a chance of winning. And so what we want to be is what the Lieutenant Governor said. We want to be that second party in those districts. And we want to stand up and let people know that you do have a choice. It's not just that these two major parties, that there is an option, and we're there to give you that. And so we're doing that across the state, looking at races to run. And along with that, we are organizing by congressional district and locality. And for those of you who may have gotten an email a couple of weeks ago, we sent out to the 5th and 6th congressional districts to get people to give us their address information if they haven't given us complete information, so that we can specifically organize everyone by their districts and get some real serious organization out in these areas where maybe the incumbents are more on the extreme side. And in this coming week, everyone should look in their inboxes and look out for an email, because we'll be expanding that to everyone across the state to try to get people registered officially as members. And what that means is we want you to be part of our voting group of Forward Party members who will be voting on organizational issues, consideration of candidates, policy issues, and so that we can make a real difference here in the state. And it requires all of us to come together. And then after you see that email, as you begin to register, we will be scheduling meetings by congressional district so that we can have those initial organizational meetings and for each district. And I'd encourage everyone to take part and be involved in the movement and be involved in supporting candidates. And also, honestly, we need donations as well. So I've put in a link in the chat for anyone who wants to make a donation. And honestly, it can be a small donation. You can do $5. You can do a recurring donation, $5 a month, $50, 100, whatever you can do. But the more of us that get involved in both volunteering our time and efforts and a little bit of money, it can go a long ways. So that's all I would say. And if anybody would like to get involved, just email virginia@forwardparty.com and I'll get back to you.
Eric, can I say something about the spoiler thing? That very notion says that the other two parties are entitled to win the election. That how dare you second party, third party people get involved because you may take away our opportunity to win. Think about that, folks. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's so true. But we definitely want to avoid, throwing any election to someone who's more extreme than who exists there. But unfortunately, we have several districts in Virginia that already have people who are pretty extreme. So we think we're a good option in those areas.
All right. Thank you again, everybody. This was wonderful. And you really honor us with your time. And again, Kerry, thank you so much. And I'm excited about your leadership. And I know Christy well. And thank you to our honored guests that were with us tonight. And you blessed us. And thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good night.